I've had SpongeBob on in the background more nights than I'd care to admit. It's one of those shows that just sort of lives in the house. You put it on, you half watch it, you drift, and somewhere along the way it stops being a cartoon you're actively paying attention to and becomes more like wallpaper, with a laugh track, comforting wallpaper, the kind you've known so long you don't really see it anymore. And then one night, for no particular reason, I actually started seeing it again. Not watching it the way a kid watches it. Watching it the way you'd watch a documentary about a small town where everyone knows each other and nobody talks about the strange thing that happened by the pier. Because once you start paying attention to what these characters actually do to one another, Bikini Bottom turns out to be a genuinely lawless little place. Cheerful, bright, full of song, and absolutely riddled with people getting away with things they should not, under any reasonable system, be getting away with. That's what tonight is about, more or less. Not a big argument, not a takedown. I'm not here to ruin anyone's childhood or tell you the show is secretly evil, because it isn't, and I love it. And that's rather the point. I just want to wander through it for a while and point at the odd bits. The theft, the cover-ups, the bloke who supposedly sold a child's soul for pocket change and then went back to flipping burgers, like nothing had happened, never actually exists in the show. The way the whole town seems to run on a moral code that changes depending on the weather. There's no order to this that really matters. We'll drift from one thing to the next, the way you drift through a house you've lived in for years, opening cupboards. Some of it's about Mr. Krabs, because honestly a lot of it is about Mr. Krabs. Some of it's about Squidward, who is somehow both the biggest victim and one of the worst offenders in the entire show. Some of it's about the sponge himself, who is nicer than all of them and still ends up holding the shovel more often than you'd expect. None of it's going to get your heart racing. That's the promise. Just a slow amble through a happy little town where almost everyone is quietly guilty of something, told by someone who finds the whole thing more endearing than alarming. Get comfortable. We're in no rush at all. If you enjoy this sort of thing, there's a subscribe button around here somewhere, and it does help, but that's the last I'll say about it. Let's just talk. The first thing to understand about Mr. Krabs, if you're going to understand anything, is that there isn't much of him underneath the money. Most characters have a personality, and then a few quirks hanging off it. Krabs has greed, and then more greed, and then a daughter he loves, in a way that mostly expresses itself through worrying about how much she costs. There's a shot the show comes back to again and again, where he's lying in a bathtub full of coins, sighing with the specific contentment of a man who has everything he wants. Not swimming in gold like a cartoon duck exactly. More like soaking in it, bathing. And the thing that gets me about it is how peaceful he looks. This is a fella whose deepest, most restful happiness comes from being physically submerged in currency. That's not a hobby. That's the load-bearing wall of the entire character. Once you clock that, his whole way of moving through the world makes a grim kind of sense. He runs a restaurant, and the restaurant exists to make money, and every single person who walks through the door is to him a wallet with legs. He charges for things nobody should charge for. There's a running gag across the years about him billing customers and staff for the most basic dignities. Napkins, condiments, using the toilet. If there's air in the room, he's working out whether he can put a price on it, and given half a chance he will. And here's the bit that always tickles me. He never pays anybody properly. His two employees, the sponge and the octopus, keep that place running from open to close. And the running joke of the entire series is that Krabs would sooner part with a limb than part with a fair wage. Squidward's been standing at that register for what must be decades of in-show time, and you get the strong sense he's never once been paid what he's worth, or possibly at all. SpongeBob works harder than anyone alive, and mostly seems to be compensated in the sheer joy of frying, which is convenient when you think about it, suspiciously convenient. If your only fry cook is genuinely chemically happy to work for nothing, you've got no reason to ever fix that. What I find funny and a bit mad is that the show made this the beloved one, the lovable old sea captain. He's got the voice, he's got the laugh, he's got the little sailor cap, and a whole generation grew up thinking of him as a warm, gruff, grandfatherly sort. And he is sometimes. But strip the accent away and describe his behaviour flatly to someone who's never seen the show, and you're describing a landlord you'd warn your friends about. A man whose defining trait is that he will always choose the money. Over comfort, over fairness, over people, over, as we'll get to, quite a lot of things you'd hope a person would rank above a couple of coins. To be fair to him, and I do want to be fair to him where I can, the early years give him a bit more of a soul. He's cheap, but he's not yet a monster about it. There's a father in there. There's a man who occasionally does the decent thing, usually after being dragged toward it, kicking and screaming. The show didn't start with him as a villain. It sort of let him curdle over time, which is its own interesting thing, and we'll come back to that idea more than once tonight. Because a lot of Bikini Bottom works that way. The nice version and the nasty version living in the same body, and the show just picking whichever one it needs that week. But even at his warmest, the money's always there, humming under everything. It's the first thing he thinks about in the morning and the last thing he thinks about at night, and it's the thing he'd save from a fire before he saved you. I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because it's genuinely the key to the whole man, and once you've got it, everything else he does stops being surprising. It just becomes a question of how far the money will take him. The answer, as it turns out, is quite far. Further than you'd think. Further, in one particular case, than 62 cents should ever be able to take anybody. But we'll get to that in its own time. No need to rush the poor man's downfall. He's having such a nice soak. Let's talk about the number, because the number is the whole thing. 62 cents. That's what Mr. Krabs sold SpongeBob's soul for. Not sold him out. Not lent him to someone for an afternoon. Sold his actual soul, the immortal one, to the Flying Dutchman in exchange for a handful of coins that wouldn't cover a bus fare. The setup, if you've not seen it or haven't seen it in years, is that the Dutchman turns up wanting SpongeBob's soul. And rather than doing the thing a normal person would do, which is say no, Krabs does the thing Krabs always does. He asks how much. That's the whole tragedy in one little beat. The Dutchman offers a soul-buying price, and instead of throwing him out, Krabs starts negotiating. There's a soul on the table, and his first instinct is to check the market rate. And what a number to land on. If he'd sold the lad for a fortune, you could at least understand it as a monstrous decision made for monstrous stakes. People have done terrible things for life-changing money, but this was pocket change. The sort of sum you find down the back of the sofa and feel mildly pleased about. He looked at his loyal, adoring, hardest-working employee, a creature who would genuinely walk into traffic for him, and decided that lad was worth less than a chocolate bar. The detail I love most is Squidward's reaction. Squidward, the most cynical resident of Bikini Bottom, a man who has seen Krabs do appalling things for money on a weekly basis and long since stopped being surprised by any of it. Even he is taken aback when your resident misanthrope, the one who assumes the worst about everyone as a baseline, is the one going, hang on, that's a step too far. You know the character has genuinely outdone himself. Squidward is the show's built-in cynicism meter, and Krabs pushed the needle clean off the dial. Now here's what actually stays with me about the episode, and it's not the sale itself, it's what happens afterward, which is nothing. There's a bit of a scramble to sort it out. The way these things always get sorted out by the end of the 22 minutes, and then it's over. Krabs doesn't sit in a corner reflecting on the kind of man who'd auction off a child's eternal essence for the price of a gumball. He doesn't get hauled in front of anyone. He goes back to work. The next episode, he's the lovable old captain again, greeting customers, worrying about his daughter, doing his little laugh. The soul thing just floats off downstream and is never mentioned. And that's the pattern, really. That's the thing I want you to keep half an ear on as we drift through the rest of tonight. Because it comes up over and over. The show will let a character do something genuinely unhinged, play it for a laugh, and then simply decline to remember it. There are no long shadows in Bikini Bottom. Nothing follows anyone home. You can sell a soul on Tuesday and be Employee of the Month adjacent by Thursday, and the town just carries on as if the whole thing were a slightly odd dream everyone agreed to forget. I've thought about why that works, why it doesn't bother you the way it probably should, and I think it's because the show is fundamentally kind even when its characters aren't. It doesn't dwell, it doesn't punish you for enjoying it. It shows you the ugly thing, gets its laugh, and moves the furniture back to where it was before you can start feeling bad, which is, funnily enough, a big part of why it's such lovely stuff to fall asleep to. There's no weight to any of it. It washes itself clean every night, like a tide coming in and smoothing the sand. Still, 62 cents. He knew the boy. He liked the boy in his way. And when the moment came, the money won, the way the money always wins, and it didn't even have to win by much. That's the thing that would keep me up. If the show let anything keep you up, it never does, but it could. There's an episode that opens on a dark and stormy night, with a little French narrator sighing about the sort of thing that happens on nights like these. And then he tells you the story, and the story is about the time Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob were fairly sure they'd killed a man, and decided the best course of action was to bury the body and say nothing. I want to be careful here, because it's a comedy, and it plays like a comedy, and nobody actually dies, but the plot, laid out plainly, is properly grim for a children's programme. A health inspector turns up at the Krusty Krab. Around the same time, there's a report on the telly about a con artist going round pretending to be a health inspector to score free food. And Krabs, being physically incapable of watching food leave the building without payment, decides the inspector in his restaurant must be the fake, so he and SpongeBob cook up a deliberately revolting patty to punish this supposed fraudster. Toenail clippings, a dip in the toilet, for good measure, dried off with Krab's own gym socks, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. The inspector's about to eat it when he chokes on a fly, slips and knocks himself out cold. And then the follow-up report comes on and reveals the actual con artist has already been caught somewhere else, which means the fella face down on their floor is the real inspector, a legitimate public official. And the two of them are now standing over him with a plate of poison they made on purpose. So they panic and they conclude, wrongly, that they've killed him. And rather than call anyone, they take the body up a hill in the dark to bury it. There's a whole grim little sequence of them digging a grave. At one point, SpongeBob leaves the head sticking out of the ground because, in his words, he thought the fellow might need some air, which is either the sweetest or the most disturbing thing anyone's ever said while burying a man. And I genuinely can't decide which. Then the police show up. And what follows is a tense little cover-up caper, where these two are trying to act natural, with a body stashed nearby, and then later, stuffed in the restaurant freezer. Krabs, who as we've established would not part with a penny to save his own mother, gets so frightened of being caught that he starts flinging money at the officers to distract them. That's how you know it's serious. The one time in the entire series he throws cash away willingly is when he thinks it might keep him out of prison for murder. It all resolves, of course. The inspector wakes up, groggy but alive. The police mistake him for a zombie and give him a hiding, and the episode wanders off to its next segment, like nothing happened. The French narrator comes back at the end, and just sort of shrugs at the whole thing. Yes, he says, they're all idiots, aren't they? And that's your lot. What I find genuinely funny about this one is how casually it treats the darkest possible material. The show isn't interested in the horror of it, it's interested in the farce. The panic, the bad decisions, the ice for the officer's soda that's kept in the same freezer as the body. It never once slows down to let you feel the actual weight of two blokes deciding, in a blind panic, that the correct response to a workplace accident is to dispose of a corpse and lie to the authorities. It just presents that as a normal thing that might happen on a stormy night in this town, and then it's on to the next. And the more I sit with it, the more it fits the pattern. Bikini Bottom is a place where the machinery of consequence just doesn't run. Two people conspire to bury a public official and cover it up, and the takeaway the narrator offers is a gentle "you daft pair." Not a lesson, not a reckoning, just a fond little sigh at the idiots. It's the same energy as the soul thing, really. A genuinely dark act, diffused entirely by the fact that the show simply refuses to hold it against anyone. I'd never want them to, mind. If the show suddenly got interested in real consequences, it wouldn't be the same show, and it certainly wouldn't be one you could nod off to. But it is worth noticing once, on a quiet night, that the coziest cartoon on television has an episode about grave digging a man you think you've murdered, and it's remembered mostly as one of the funny ones. That tells you something about the whole enterprise. It's darker than it lets on, and it never lets on, and that's exactly how it gets away with it. Some of Krab's worst behaviour comes not from a big dramatic moment, but from a small one that spirals, and there's a lovely example of that built entirely around a hat. SpongeBob buys a hat from the Krusty Krab gift shop. One of those novelty ones with the cup holders on the side and the straws. The sort of thing you'd wear to a match and immediately regret. He loves it. Absolutely adores it. And Krabs, who sold it to him for a pittance without a second thought, then finds out the hat is actually worth a small fortune. A collector's item. Worth far, far more than the loose change SpongeBob handed over. Now a normal person, having made a bad sale, shrugs and takes the loss. It's your own shop. You set the price. You lose some, you win some. But Krabs cannot abide it. The idea that value has left his possession, that money that could have been his is now sitting on someone else's head, it eats him alive. So he sets out to get the hat back, and the lengths he goes to are where it tips from petty into genuinely mad. First, he tries to swap SpongeBob out of it with other hats, which the lad politely declines, because he loves the one he's got. Then at night, Krabs draws a rubbish little ghost on a bit of paper, dangles it on a fishing line, and pretends to be a spirit demanding the hat be returned to its rightful owner. When SpongeBob, being SpongeBob, asks who the rightful owner is, Krabs panics and makes up a name on the spot. And the name he invents happens to belong, coincidentally, to an actual dead man. So SpongeBob, wanting to do the decent thing, goes and lays the hat to rest with the dead man's remains. Which he can do because apparently, in Bikini Bottom, you can just pop down to a grave and leave your hat there. And so Mr. Krabs, a grown crab, the owner of a successful business, ends up going to the cemetery in the dead of night to dig up a grave and retrieve a hat. He desecrates a burial site for a hat. There's a whole sequence of him fighting his way through what the show cheerfully presents as an army of the undead, all so he can get his crustaceous claws on a bit of headwear worth a few quid. It is, when you say it out loud, one of the most deranged risk-to-reward calculations any character has ever made. He is prepared to rob the dead and battle a legion of skeletons rather than eat a loss on a novelty hat. There's a background gag in that graveyard sequence that I think about more than I think about the actual plot. On his way through the cemetery, Krabs passes Squidward, kneeling and weeping over a gravestone. And the gravestone is a memorial to Squidward's own hopes and dreams. His ambitions, dead and buried, with a headstone, being mourned by the man who had them. It's just there in the background. No dialogue about it, no lingering. The show doesn't even nudge you. It just plants this tiny, perfect, devastating little image of the saddest character in the show grieving the life he never got to have, while a greedy crab tramples past on his way to loot a corpse. That's the show in miniature, that one shot. The foreground is the joke, the background is the tragedy, and you're meant to laugh at the foreground and only half notice the thing breaking your heart behind it. We'll come back to Squidward properly later, because that little graveside moment is more or less his whole existence compressed into 3 seconds. And he deserves more than 3 seconds. But sticking with crabs for now, the hat business tells you where his flaw is. And the answer is that he doesn't really have one. There's no amount so small it isn't worth chasing. No line up to and including the sanctity of the grave that a big enough itch about money won't get him to cross. And he's not even doing it out of need. He's rich. He's got the tub of coins. He does it because the wanting never switches off. That's the thing about the greed as a personality. It's not aiming at anything. It's just always running in the background like a fridge hum. And every so often it drives him to go dig up a stranger over a hat. If you want to understand what it's actually like to work for Mr. Krabs and not just to be near him, there are 2 episodes that lay it out with a clarity that's almost uncomfortable once you notice it. The first involves a strike. Krabs starts billing his own employees for things at the Krusty Krab. Not customers, staff. He charges SpongeBob and Squidward for the privilege of existing on the premises. There's a bill for breathing, a bill for standing. The itemized list of charges reads like a fever dream a landlord might have, and the maddening bit is that SpongeBob, bless him, doesn't even mind at first. He just pays it. He's so devoted to the place that being charged for the air in his own workplace strikes him as a reasonable cost of the job he loves. It takes Squidward, the one with a functioning sense of injustice, to point out that this is insane and to talk him into downing tools. So they go on strike. And what strikes me, if you'll forgive it, is how the whole thing sits somewhere between farce and a genuine little parable about labour. Here's a boss so consumed by extraction that he's found a way to make his own workforce a revenue stream. He's not content to underpay them. He wants them to pay him for the honour of being underpaid. That's a level of greed that loops all the way back around into something almost philosophical. If a customer is a wallet with legs, then an employee is a wallet you've already got locked in the building. The second episode is the one that actually gets to me a bit. Krabs loses his first dime, the very first coin he ever earned, which he's kept for decades like a holy relic. And when he can't find it, he doesn't retrace his steps or consider that he might have simply misplaced it. He decides with no evidence whatsoever that Squidward stole it, and he fires him on the spot. No investigation, no conversation, just an accusation pulled out of thin air, and a man's livelihood gone because they dared to strike against a crab's unfair billing practices. And it doesn't stop at the sacking. Squidward, now jobless, loses his home. He ends up with nowhere to go, and it's SpongeBob who takes him in, because of course it is. There's a stretch of that episode where Squidward is genuinely down and out, homeless and adrift, all because his boss had a tantrum about a dime he'd actually had the whole time. When the truth comes out, when that precious first dime turns up exactly where it was always going to be, there's no grand apology. No reckoning for what he put the man through. Squidward gets his miserable job back, and that's meant to be the happy ending. He returns to the register he hates, working for the man who threw him into the street on a baseless whim, and we're all supposed to feel that order has been restored. Order has been restored, I suppose. But look at what order is in this town. Order is Squidward, back behind the counter, having lost his home and regained nothing but the exact life he was desperate to escape in the first place. The system didn't fail him exactly. The system worked as designed, and the system, when you get down to it, is one crab's moods, deciding whether the people under him have a roof. I don't want to make this heavier than it is because it isn't heavy in the watching. It's brisk and it's funny, and Squidward's grumbling carries it along nicely. But the labour situation in Bikini Bottom, once you clock it, is bleak in a way the show never quite acknowledges. 2 men, one of whom would work for free out of sheer love, and one of whom is trapped by a total lack of options, both entirely at the mercy of a boss who sees them as expenses to be minimised. There's no union that sticks, no regulator that shows up, no consequence that lands, just the 2 of them, turning up day after day, keeping the lights on for a man who'd charge them for the electricity if he thought they'd stand for it. And they do stand for it. That's the quietly sad part. They always go back. The strike ends, the dime turns up, the status quo reasserts itself, and by the next episode, Squidward's at the register again, and SpongeBob's at the grill again, and Krabs is in his tub of coins again, and the whole thing settles back as if none of it ever happened, which, as we keep finding, is the one truly reliable law of this place. Nothing changes. Everyone returns to their post. The tide comes in and smooths the sand. Something crept up on me slowly over the years. The designated bad guy of SpongeBob, the little green fella you're meant to boo, is arguably the most sympathetic character in the entire show. Plankton runs the Chum Bucket, the failing restaurant across the road from the Krusty Krab, and his whole existence is organised around one goal, which is getting hold of the Krabby Patty recipe so that people might, for once, actually eat at his place. And he never does. That's the joke of him across hundreds of episodes. He schemes, he builds contraptions, he disguises himself, he gets so close, and then he loses. Almost every single time, he is the most reliably defeated character in the history of the medium. If Plankton wins, something has gone wrong with the universe, and it'll be put right by the end of the segment. And the more you watch that happen, the harder it gets to actually root against him. Because what's his crime really? He wants customers. He runs a restaurant nobody comes to, and he wants people to come to it. The recipe stealing is bad, sure, industrial espionage, not ideal. But set that against his rival, the man across the street who sells souls and buries inspectors and robs graves, and Plankton starts to look less like a supervillain and more like a desperate small business owner who's been losing to the same competitor for his entire life and has gone slightly round the bend about it. He's tiny for one thing, physically the smallest thing in the show. He's married to a computer, which the show plays for laughs, but which is, if you sit with it, quite lonely. His whole family line, going back generations, is a running bit about them being downtrodden and eaten, and generally at the bottom of every food chain there is. He's a single-celled organism who dreams of running a successful eatery and gets crushed over and over by a crab who was his friend once and is now his tormentor. When you frame it that way, and the show occasionally does frame it that way, it's genuinely a bit tragic. The eternal loser, still turning up to work, still convinced this is the day it turns around. There's one episode I want to touch on carefully, because it's the one people point to as the moment the show went too far with him, and I think they're right too. Krabs discovers that Plankton is frightened of whales, and rather than leaving it, he uses that fear to torment him relentlessly, dressing up to frighten him, hounding him for days on end. And it pushes Plankton to a genuinely dark place, somewhere the show, honestly, had no business going, and certainly no business playing for laughs. I'm not going to dwell on it, because it's the kind of material that doesn't belong in a wind-down like this, and frankly, it didn't belong in the show either. That's more or less the consensus that grew up around it afterward. A lot of people who love SpongeBob consider that episode the low point. The moment the cheerful cruelty tipped into something with an edge that cut wrong. Krabs shows no remorse. He never faces anything for it. And the whole thing leaves a taste that the show usually knows better than to leave. I mention it only because you can't do an honest wander through the moral wrongs of this town and pretend its darkest corner isn't there. But we'll leave it in the corner where it belongs and step back into the light. Because the point I actually want to land is the gentler one. The show gave itself a villain and then spent decades quietly making him the underdog. And that's a strange, almost accidental act of storytelling. You're supposed to want Plankton to fail, and instead, you find yourself, somewhere around the 100th defeat, wishing the little bloke would just catch a break, get one customer, sell one chum-based meal to one person who genuinely enjoyed it, go home to his computer wife, and for one night, feel like a success. He never does, of course. That's not the kind of show it is. But there's a warmth in how doomed he is, and a real softness underneath the rivalry. Krabs and Plankton were friends, long ago, and the show remembers that even when the characters pretend not to. Two old mates who fell out over a recipe and never quite got over it. One of them ended up rich and cruel, the other ended up small and sad, and permanently losing. And I know which one I'd actually want to have a drink with. And it isn't the one in the tub of coins. There's a particular flavour of Krabs' episode that I find quietly the most damning, and it's the one where he works out how to turn something alive into a revenue stream. The clearest example is the jellyfish one. It starts innocently enough. SpongeBob, who loves jellyfishing the way other people love a Sunday walk, puts a bit of jellyfish jelly on a Krabby Patty as a treat, and a customer tastes it and goes mad for it. Suddenly there's demand for jelly patties, and Krabs, smelling money, gets SpongeBob to start bringing in jellyfish to keep up with it. At first the lad only takes what he needs and lets the creatures go, because he's SpongeBob and he actually cares about the jellyfish. They're his friends. This is his happy place. But demand grows and Krabs pushes, and before long SpongeBob is hauling in jellyfish by the netful, and the fields where they live start emptying out. And it turns out Krabs isn't just borrowing a bit of jelly. He's got the caught jellyfish packed into a factory, squeezed for everything they're worth, farmed like livestock. The whole thing is a fairly unsubtle little jab at the food industry, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. The animals get hoovered up, processed and monetized, and the only reason it ever stops is that one clever jellyfish, the one who's too smart to be caught, drags SpongeBob to the factory to show him what he's actually been a part of. That's the shape of it. SpongeBob's love of the jellyfish, weaponized by Krabs into a machine that nearly wipes them out. The purest-hearted characters in the show turned, without quite realizing it, into the instrument of an extinction event, because his boss saw pound signs and pointed him at a field full of living things. There's a later episode that does the same trick with SpongeBob's own pet. Krabs notices that coins are sticking to Gary the snail, and rather than finding that odd or worrying about why, he immediately sees an opportunity. He starts using Gary as a living magnet to pull coins off people all over town, which is two crimes stacked on top of each other, if you're keeping count. It's theft, obviously. He's robbing the whole of Bikini Bottom one stuck coin at a time. But it's also just cruel to the snail, who's visibly not enjoying being dragged around and used as a device. And SpongeBob, once again, gets talked into going along with it, because Krabs is very good at making the wrong thing sound fine, and because SpongeBob wants to believe the best about the man he works for. That's the bit that connects these two. It's not really about jellyfish or snails. It's about the way Krabs looks at anything that lives and breathes, and instinctively asks whether he can get money out of it. A field of creatures, a little boy's pet, doesn't matter. If it's got a pulse, it's got potential, and potential means profit, and profit is the only thing in the whole ocean he actually loves. Squidward's labour, SpongeBob's devotion, the jellyfish, the snail, they're all the same to him at the deepest level. Inputs, things that go into the machine so that coins come out the other end. And what makes it land, rather than just being a string of bad deeds, is that SpongeBob keeps being the delivery system. He's the net that empties the field. He's the one carrying the magnet snail round town. His goodness, his eagerness, his desperate wish to please, all of it gets pointed at the wrong target by a man who knows exactly how to aim it. There's something a bit heartbreaking in that, actually. The most decent creature in the show is also the most easily used, and the person who uses him best is the one he trusts most. We'll get to SpongeBob's own share of the blame a bit later, because he isn't entirely innocent in all this, and pretending he is would be letting him off too easy. But in the living things into money business, the driver is always Krabs. He's the one doing the sums. SpongeBob just holds the net and smiles and doesn't ask why the field's gone so quiet. I mentioned that little gravestone earlier, the one Squidward was weeping over, the memorial to his own hopes and dreams. I want to sit with Squidward properly now, because he's the character I've come round to most as I've got older, and I suspect I'm not alone in that. When you're a kid watching SpongeBob, Squidward's the grump, the one who doesn't want to play, the obstacle between the fun and more fun. You side with the sponge and the starfish, obviously, because they're having a lovely time and Squidward's telling them to keep it down. But somewhere along the way, and I think it happens to most people around the time they get a job and a mortgage and a neighbour of their own, you flip. You start watching Squidward and going, oh, I understand him now. I understand him completely. Because look at his actual life. He's stuck at a job he hates, working a register for a boss who despises spending money on him, in a town he can't stand, living next door to two people whose entire existence seems designed to interrupt his peace. He wants to be an artist. He plays the clarinet badly, but with genuine feeling, and he paints, and he dances, and none of it ever quite comes together for him. He has taste. He has ambition. What he doesn't have is talent that matches the size of the wanting, and he knows it, and that gap is where he lives. That's the tragedy of him. It's not that he's talentless, it's that he cares desperately about art and is only ever going to be mediocre at it, and he's self-aware enough to feel exactly how far his reach exceeds his grasp. Every so often the show dangles a chance in front of him, a shot at recognition, a moment where it looks like Squidward might finally get the applause he's been aching for his whole life. And every single time, something snatches it away. Sometimes it's SpongeBob blundering in. Sometimes it's his old rival, the insufferably successful Squilliam, turning up to remind him of everything he isn't. And sometimes, most painfully, it's Squidward himself, his own ego or nerves or bad luck, tripping him at the last hurdle. He gets so close to happiness you can taste it for him, and then it's gone, and he's back at the register, and nothing has changed. There's an ache to that which the show is surprisingly honest about. It doesn't fix him. It never lets him win in any lasting way, because the whole architecture of the series depends on him being the miserable one, the counterweight to SpongeBob's joy. He's the opposite of the main character by design, which means he's structurally forbidden from ever cheering up for long. However much you want it for him, and you do want it for him, the show cannot give it to him without stopping being itself. He's condemned to his mood the way a shark's condemned to keep swimming, and I find that genuinely poignant in a quiet way. Here's a character whose defining feature is disappointment, and the show just lets that be true week after week without ever really promising it'll get better. Most kids' programs wouldn't dare. Most kids' programs need everyone to end up smiling. SpongeBob lets one of its leads be permanently, structurally sad, a man mourning the life he didn't get, and it plays that for comedy, but it never pretends. The sadness isn't real underneath. The thing I keep coming back to is that Squidward isn't wrong about anything. He's right that his job is beneath him. He's right that his neighbours are exhausting. He's right that his boss is a cheapskate who doesn't value him. He's right that his talent will never take him where he dreams of going. His problem isn't that he's deluded. His problem is that he sees his situation with total clarity and is completely powerless to change it. That's a very grown-up kind of misery to put in a cartoon about a talking sponge. And it's why, when you're old enough, he stops being the grump who won't play and becomes the one you understand in your bones. So before we talk about the ways Squidward's a bit of a monster himself, and he is, we'll get to that, I wanted to give him this: the genuine sympathy he's earned. Because whatever he does to SpongeBob, and some of it's genuinely nasty, he's doing it from inside a life that's been quietly grinding him down for as long as the show's been on. That doesn't excuse him, but it explains him. And there's a difference, and Squidward, of all the characters, deserves to have the difference drawn. April the 1st. That's where I want to start with the other side of Squidward, because the April Fool's episode is the one that shows you he isn't just a victim of this town. Given the chance, he can be one of its cruelest residents. The setup is that SpongeBob loves April Fool's Day and spends it playing harmless little pranks, the kind where the worst that happens is somebody's got a squirty flower in their face and everyone has a laugh. The customers are all in on it. It's gentle, it's daft, and Squidward, who cannot bear the sound of other people enjoying themselves, gets more and more wound up by the good cheer until he decides to teach SpongeBob what a real prank looks like. So he rigs up an elaborate trap. He gets SpongeBob to clean up a mess, and when the lad bends to it, Squidward triggers the whole contraption, and SpongeBob is flung round the restaurant, smashing into things, ending up battered and humiliated in a bin. And it's not a gentle prank. It genuinely hurts him, and worse than the physical bit, it upsets him. SpongeBob, who wouldn't hurt a fly, who was only trying to make everyone smile, runs out crying. And Squidward's standing there, having got exactly what he wanted, which was to wipe the joy off the day. Now, the version of that episode from the early years actually gives Squidward a conscience. He feels awful. He spends the rest of it trying to apologise, tripping over himself to make it right, and he gets there in the end. That's the Squidward who's a grump, but not a villain, who does a cruel thing and is horrified at himself for it. I've got a lot of time for that Squidward. But there's a later episode that does something similar and takes the conscience out, and it's genuinely mean-spirited. Squidward gets hold of SpongeBob's diary and reads it aloud to the entire restaurant. Out loud, to a room full of customers, every private, embarrassing, tender little thing the lad ever wrote down. Broadcast for a laugh at his expense. SpongeBob's mortified, runs off in tears again, and this time Squidward doesn't much care. He does eventually land in a bit of bother for it, stuck in the stocks in the town square while people chuck things at him, but the remorse that made the earlier version bearable just isn't there. He read a child's diary to a crowd because it amused him, and that's about the size of it. And then there's the one that I think is quietly his worst, because it's not an impulse, it's a plan. Early on, Squidward is so fed up with the noise of SpongeBob and Patrick being best friends next door that he sets out, deliberately, to break their friendship up. He engineers a falling out between the two of them, turns them against each other. Not because they've done anything to deserve it beyond being loud, but because he wants quiet, and destroying the closest friendship in the show is an acceptable price for a bit of peace. That's cold, that's genuinely cold. Two people who love each other, and he takes a wrecking ball to it for his own convenience. So you've got this character who is on the one hand the show's great tragic figure, ground down and overlooked, and mourning the life he'll never have. And on the other hand, when he gets the upper hand, he'll read your diary to a crowd and break up your friendships and fling you round a restaurant for the sin of being happy near him. Both of those descriptions fit him, and the show never really squares them up, because it doesn't need to. It just reaches for whichever Squidward the week happens to call for. I don't think that's a flaw, mind. I think it's actually one of the more honest things about him. People are like that. The same person who's genuinely suffering can also be genuinely rotten to the people around them, and the suffering doesn't cancel the rottenness, and the rottenness doesn't cancel the suffering. Squidward's a miserable man being punished by life, and Squidward's a man who lashes out and hurts the one creature in town who's never wished him any harm. You need the whole of him to see him properly. He earns your sympathy, and then 10 minutes later, he spends it on some bit of nastiness, and by the following week, he's quietly earned it back again, with nobody keeping score. Patrick is a harder one to be cross with, because Patrick genuinely doesn't know what he's doing. There's no malice in him, not really, and somehow that makes some of his behaviour more unsettling rather than less, because you can't even be properly angry at him. He's like a large, pink, well-meaning force of nature that occasionally leaves a trail of destruction behind it, and then asks why everyone's upset. The clearest case is the toy episode. It starts with Patrick talking SpongeBob into buying a kids' meal for the two of them to share, and then Patrick just eats the whole thing himself. Which is a small thing, a greedy friend thing. We've all got a mate like that. Then Mr. Krabs cobbles together a little toy for them to share. A sad little Krabby Patty with limbs stuck on, and SpongeBob absolutely adores it, names it, loves it like it's alive, and Patrick decides the toy is his. Only his. He will not share it. This is a fella who, a moment earlier, was lecturing about the joy of sharing, and now that there's something he actually wants, he clutches it and refuses to let his best friend near it, and it escalates in a way that's honestly a bit shocking. When it looks like SpongeBob might get a turn, might get to hold this toy that means so much to him, Patrick's response is to eat it, to destroy it entirely. If I can't have it, he decides, no one can, and he swallows the thing whole so that the possibility of sharing is gone forever. And then, at the end, he has the gall to ask SpongeBob whether he's learned anything about sharing, when Patrick himself has learned precisely nothing and in fact caused the entire disaster. It's the confidence of it that gets me. He wrecks his friend's happiness out of pure selfishness and then delivers the moral as if he's the reasonable one. Then there's the time SpongeBob left Gary in Patrick's care. Now, leaving your pet with Patrick is a questionable decision to begin with, and the episode bears that out spectacularly. Patrick is a catastrophically bad minder. He eats the snail's food right in front of him, leaving the poor thing hungry, and there's a bit where he decides to give Gary a bath, and the bath turns out to be, in the loosest possible sense, a flamethrower. He's not being cruel on purpose. That's what's so mad about it. He genuinely thinks he's looking after the snail. He's just so profoundly oblivious that his care and active harm become the same thing. Good intentions pointed directly at disaster. And then my favourite of the lot for sheer strangeness. There's the episode where SpongeBob decides to go and live among the jellyfish, out in nature, away from it all. It's a gentle little existential thing. The sponge stepping back from society, and Patrick's reaction to his best friend choosing a quiet life is to hunt him. Genuinely hunt him. He takes a net and pursues SpongeBob across the fields, trying to catch him and bring him back, treating him like a specimen to be trapped. There's no version of that which isn't unhinged when you describe it plainly. His best friend wants some space, and Patrick's response is to stalk him through the wilderness with hunting gear. And again, in his own head, this is love. This is him missing his mate. It's just that the missing comes out as pursuit, because Patrick doesn't have the wiring to express it any other way. That's the through line with him. Everything Patrick does wrong, he does from a place of not understanding. He's not greedy the way Krabs is greedy, with cold calculation. He's not cruel the way Squidward can be cruel, with intent. He's just operating on pure impulse with no filter and no awareness of consequence. And because there's a genuinely sweet creature in there somewhere, you keep forgiving him. You can't help it. He'll do something appalling and then look at you with those blank, cheerful eyes, and you just sort of sigh and let it go, which is, I think, its own quiet little comment on how this town works. Patrick gets away with everything, not because he's clever, but because he's harmless in intent, even when he's harmful in effect. Nobody can stay angry at him. The show only sometimes punishes him. He drifts through Bikini Bottom, leaving small wreckages everywhere, and everyone just accepts it as the weather. He's the sweetest sociopath in the sea, and I mean that with total affection, because there's not a scheming bone in his body. There aren't many bones in him at all, if we're being accurate. He's a sea sponge. But you know what I mean? Now we come to the sponge himself, and this is the tricky one, because SpongeBob is genuinely good. I want to say that plainly before I say anything else. Of everyone in this town, he's the one with the kindest heart, the most generosity, the least malice. He wishes people well. He tries. If Bikini Bottom has a soul, it's probably him. And yet, if you actually tally up the wrongdoing in this show and ask who was physically present, holding the metaphorical shovel, an uncomfortable number of times, it's SpongeBob. Not scheming, not driving it, but there, helping, enabling, doing the deed while someone smarter and colder points him at it. He's the one who caught the jellyfish until the fields were empty. Mr. Krabs is the one who carried the coin magnet snail round town. He's the one on the other end of the shovel on that hill, burying a man he thought he'd killed, leaving the head out for air. Every one of those, he did. His hands were on it. And the reason he did it is the thing I actually find most interesting about him, because it's not stupidity, though he can be daft. It's loyalty. Specifically, it's loyalty to Mr. Krabs, which SpongeBob holds above more or less everything, including, at times, his own conscience. There's a rule in the Krusty Krab handbook, an actual rule, about never revealing the location of the secret recipe, and SpongeBob treats that document with the seriousness most people reserve for the law or scripture. He is devoted to that restaurant and that crab in a way that's genuinely a bit alarming when you look straight at it. Krabs is, by any fair reading, exploiting him, underpaying him, using his good nature as free fuel. And SpongeBob would run through a wall for the man. When there's a conflict between doing the right thing and being loyal to his boss, loyalty wins more often than it should, and SpongeBob doesn't even seem to feel the tension. To him, the two things are the same. Being good and being loyal to Krabs are the same instinct. And Krabs knows it, and Krabs uses it. You saw it in the whale fear episode we touched on earlier. For a moment, SpongeBob actually stands up. He sees Krabs tormenting Plankton, and he calls it out, tells his boss he's gone too far, does the decent thing. And then, a beat later, he folds. He's reminded that he owes Krabs, that he broke a rule once, that his loyalty is on the hook, and he caves and helps the man he just told off. His conscience flickered on, and then loyalty smothered it. That's the SpongeBob problem in one scene. He knows right from wrong. He just has a competing loyalty that keeps overriding the knowing. There's also, and I say this gently because I do love him, a boundary problem. His relationship with Squidward, from Squidward's side, is not far off harassment. SpongeBob cannot take a hint, cannot leave the man alone, cannot grasp that his neighbour genuinely, desperately wants peace and quiet. Now, a lot of the times Squidward deserves what he gets, we covered that, but some of the times Squidward just wants to be left alone in his own home, and SpongeBob physically cannot allow it, because in his sunny little head, everyone must be friends and everyone must be having fun. And if you're not having fun, then he simply hasn't tried hard enough yet. It comes from love. But love that won't take no for an answer is still a kind of pressure, and Squidward lives under it every single day. I don't want to be too hard on him, because the whole point of SpongeBob is that he's a genuinely lovely creature in a world full of people who take advantage of exactly that. His goodness is real. It's just that his goodness is also the most exploitable resource in Bikini Bottom, and the people around him have all, in their way, worked out how to spend it. Krabs spends it on profit. Patrick spends it on getting his way. Squidward, when he's low enough, spends it on someone to look down on. And SpongeBob keeps handing it over, cheerfully, because it never once occurs to him that the people he loves might be using him. That's the quiet tragedy underneath the happiest character on television. He's not a bad person. He's a good person who keeps ending up on the wrong side of things because he loves the wrong crab too much and can't imagine that anyone means him ill. Innocence isn't the same as blamelessness. He's innocent, all right, but he's holding the shovel more often than an innocent man should be. I want to talk about someone who doesn't get talked about enough in this context, because once you start thinking about her, you can't stop. Her situation is genuinely one of the bleakest in the whole show. Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob's driving instructor, a pufferfish who made the single worst career decision in Bikini Bottom, which was to try and teach SpongeBob how to operate a boat. The joke on the surface is simple. SpongeBob is a catastrophic driver. He passes every written test with flying colours. He knows the theory perfectly, and then he gets behind the wheel and becomes an agent of pure chaos. Crashes, destruction, the works, and Mrs. Puff has to sit in the passenger seat for all of it, term after term, year after year, because he keeps enrolling and keeps failing and keeps coming back. But sit with what that actually does to her over time, and it stops being a joke and starts being a portrait of a woman being slowly broken. She wanted a quiet life teaching people to drive. Instead, she's been assigned, apparently for eternity, one student who cannot learn. who destroys everything he touches the moment he takes the wheel, and who she is professionally unable to escape. She's tried to fail him. She's tried to get rid of him. It never takes. He always comes back. And every time he comes back, a little more of her sanity goes with it. There's an episode where she actually loses her job over his driving, and rather than that being a relief, it becomes clear how trapped she is even then, because her whole identity is tied up in this school she can't succeed at. And there are moments across the series where she is visibly, genuinely at the end of her rope, flinching, twitching, the look of a person whose nervous system has been worn down to bare wire. At various points the show has her fantasizing about a life without him, has her land in actual legal trouble because of his driving, has her contemplate escape routes that get darker than a kids' show usually goes. She is a woman being ground into dust by one relentless, cheerful, unteachable force, and the force doesn't even know it's doing it. Because that's the cruelest part. SpongeBob isn't tormenting her on purpose. He adores Mrs. Puff. He wants nothing more than to make her proud, to finally pass, to earn her approval. His whole heart is in it. And that somehow makes it worse, not better, because you can't even hate him for it. He's not a bully. He's just a walking catastrophe pointed directly at one poor woman's life. And his sincerity means she can't even have the satisfaction of resenting him cleanly. He loves her. He's destroying her. Same as Patrick with the flamethrower bath, really. The care and the harm are the same motion. And nobody comes to help her. That's the Bikini Bottom of it. There's no system that reassigns her, no mercy that pulls her out, no authority that looks at this clearly doomed pairing and says, right, this isn't working. Let's separate these two for both their sakes. She's just stuck, fixed in place, condemned to the passenger seat by a town that doesn't seem to notice or care that one of its citizens is quietly falling apart in slow motion. I think about her more than I probably should. She's a main character, really, a recurring face who is part of the core cast, but her predicament is one of the purest examples of the thing this whole show does, where a genuinely dark situation is painted in bright colours and scored with a jaunty little tune, so you laugh instead of wince. A woman losing her mind, one crash at a time, with no way out and no one to save her. That's the actual premise. They just draw it cheerful. And here's what gets me. She keeps showing up to work, same as Squidward at his register, same as Plankton at his empty restaurant. She turns up. She gets in the boat. She takes a breath and tells SpongeBob to start the engine, knowing exactly how it's going to go, because what else is she going to do? That's a kind of quiet heroism, honestly, or a kind of quiet doom. And in this town, the two look almost identical. Poor Mrs. Puff. Of everyone here, she might be the one who least deserves what she's got, and she's got it worst of all, and hardly anyone even notices. I want to go back to Krabs one more time, not because I've run out of other people to talk about, but because there are two smaller episodes of his that I think capture something the big dramatic ones miss. They're about scale, about how wildly out of proportion his reaction to money can be. The first is the penny. SpongeBob finds a penny on the floor of the Krusty Krab. 1 penny. And Krabs decides that penny is his, obviously, because everything in and around that building is his, and he becomes utterly convinced that SpongeBob has it and is hiding it from him. So he goes to war over it. And I do mean war. He tears the place apart. He follows SpongeBob home and searches his house and his garden. There's a bit where he demolishes a cinema, an entire cinema, a functioning business that presumably makes actual money, in his hunt for a single 1-cent coin. The maths of it is glorious in its idiocy. He causes untold destruction, ruins property, wrecks a night out for a whole crowd of people, all in pursuit of the smallest denomination of currency that exists. You could not design a clearer picture of a man whose greed has entirely detached from reason. It's not even about the value anymore. A penny has no value worth chasing. It's about the wanting, running wild, with no break on it at all. The second is the pearl, and this one's a little nastier because there's a genuine victim. There's a day at the zoo, a sort of local free-for-all, and Krabs treats it as an invitation to help himself to everything that isn't nailed down. Balloons, drinks, the lot. And in the course of his grabbing, he ends up taking something he shouldn't from clam. A giant clam at the zoo. An egg, essentially. He nicks it, mistaking it for treasure. And the fallout, the giant creature's distress, the chaos that follows, all of that gets pinned on somebody else, while Krabs quietly keeps what he took. He's not just greedy in that one. He's a thief who lets another take the blame, which is a meaner shade of the same colour. What links the penny and the pearl, for me, is that neither of them is really about money in any sensible sense. The penny's worthless. The pearl he didn't even need. These aren't the acts of a man carefully building wealth. They're the acts of a man in the grip of a compulsion he can't switch off, grabbing at things because grabbing is what he does, long past the point where the grabbing makes any sense. A rational miser would ignore a penny. It's not worth the effort. But Krabs isn't rational about it. It's not a strategy. It's closer to an addiction. And like most addictions, it stopped being about the substance a long time ago and became about the reaching itself. And I find that oddly humanizing, weirdly enough. Not likable, but human. Because we all know someone who's like that about something, who chases the thing long after the thing has stopped being worth chasing, who can't let a small loss go even when the letting go would cost them nothing. Krabs is that impulse given a body, and a restaurant, and a tub of coins. He's what happens when the wanting is allowed to run the whole show, unchecked, forever, with no daughter or conscience or fear of prison strong enough to fully rein it in. He'd tell you he does it for Pearl, his daughter, and there's a sliver of truth in that. He does love her, but you can't spend a demolished cinema on your daughter's future. You can't feed a child with a stolen clam's egg. The penny and the pearl weren't for anyone. They were for the reaching. And the reaching in the end is the whole of him. The thing underneath the sailor cap, and the funny laugh, and the lovable old captain routine. A crab who cannot, physically cannot, watch value walk out the door, even when the value is 1 cent, even when chasing it costs him everything around it. There's something almost pure about greed, that total. Terrible, but pure. We've spent all this time on the main cast, but I want to talk for a bit about everyone else. The crowd, the nameless residents of Bikini Bottom, who fill the Krusty Krab and line the streets, and turn up whenever a scene needs a few extra faces. Because collectively, the town itself has a moral character, and it's not a flattering one. This is a place that turns on people at the drop of a hat and turns back just as fast, with no memory and no consistency, and a truly bottomless appetite for a bandwagon. Think back to that April Fool's episode. When Squidward pulls his cruel prank and SpongeBob runs off crying, the whole restaurant turns on Squidward instantly. They're appalled. They round on him, denounce him, storm out in disgust at his nastiness. And on the face of it, that's the town having a moral backbone, standing up for the little sponge. Good for them. But watch the same crowd on any other day, and they'll happily laugh along at all sorts of cruelty, cheer on all manner of nonsense, so long as the wind's blowing the right way. Their outrage isn't principled, it's a mood. It arrives when the moment calls for it, and evaporates the second the moment passes. You see it even more starkly in the diary episode. Squidward reads SpongeBob's private thoughts to the room, and the crowd laughs at SpongeBob, and Squidward ends up publicly punished for it, locked up in the town's square while people fling things at him. Now, reading someone's diary aloud is a rotten thing to do, no argument, but the glee with which the town turns to punishment, the speed of it, the way they go from customers eating their lunch to a mob chucking tomatoes at a man in the stocks, that's its own kind of ugly. They're not really defending SpongeBob, they're enjoying having someone to condemn. The moral outrage is just the ticket that gets them into the fun. That's the thing about a mob, and Bikini Bottom is, at heart, a mob with a nice paint job. It has no fixed values. It has appetites. It wants a hero when a hero's on offer, and it wants a villain to punish when a villain's on offer, and it'll cast the same person as either depending on the hour. There's no due process here, no sense of proportion. No one stops to ask what actually happened before the tomatoes start flying. The crowd feels something, all together, all at once, and then it acts on the feeling, and then it forgets. Same as everyone else in this town, the crowd doesn't carry anything forward. Yesterday's villain is today's face in the queue, and I think that's actually the quiet engine underneath a lot of what we've talked about tonight. The reason Krabs gets away with it, the reason Squidward's cruelty never sticks to him, the reason Patrick can wreak havoc and stroll off whistling, is partly that the town they all live in has no functioning moral memory. It reacts, it doesn't remember. It'll punish you in the moment if it catches you and the mood is right, and it'll have completely forgotten by next week. There's no institution holding anyone to account, because the closest thing to an institution is the crowd, and the crowd has the attention span of a goldfish and the judgment of a coin toss. The police, when they turn up, are worse than useless. In fact, there isn't any SpongeBob storyline involving a burial business where two men confess to a killing and the police beat up a very much alive victim for being a zombie. That scenario comes from somewhere else entirely. That's the level of law enforcement on offer. So there's no top-down justice and no bottom-up justice either. Just this fickle, forgetful, easily led population that swings between adoration and fury and never lands anywhere solid. Which is bleak if you push on it. But it's also, I think, part of why the show feels so safe to sink into. Because a town with no moral memory is a town where nothing can really go wrong for long. Every grievance dissolves. Every crime washes out. Every mob disperses and forgets what it was angry about. It's chaos, but it's soft chaos. Chaos with no teeth. Because nobody holds a grudge long enough for it to matter. And there's something almost restful in that. In a strange way, a world where everything is forgiven, not because anyone's noble, but because nobody can be bothered to remember. Not a good town, but a peaceful one, in its own daft amnesiac way. You notice something if you watch enough of the show, across enough years, and it's a slightly melancholy little observation, so I'll keep it gentle. The characters got meaner over time. Not all at once and not permanently, but there's a definite stretch in the middle years where nearly everyone in Bikini Bottom curdled a bit, and the greed and the cruelty that had always been there got turned up past the point of comfort. Early Krabs, as I said right at the start, is cheap but human. He's a miser with a soul, a father who happens to love money, a bit of a rogue but fundamentally someone you could root for. Then somewhere in the middle seasons, he hardens into something colder. The greed stops being a lovable flaw and starts being the entire operating system. The soul thins out. He goes from a man who loves money and also loves his daughter and his crew, to a man who loves money and merely tolerates everyone else as a means to more of it. The whale fear episode we skirted around lives right in that stretch, and it's no coincidence. That's Krabs with the humanity boiled off. Patrick does the same thing. Early Patrick is sweet and dim, a lovable idiot who means well, and occasionally, through sheer stupidity, causes trouble. Middle Patrick gets genuinely unpleasant. The toy episode, where he refuses to share and lets his selfishness run the show, is peak curdled Patrick. The sweetness is still nominally there, but it's been shoved aside to make room for a selfishness and a spite that the early version simply didn't have. He goes from an innocent who breaks things by accident to something closer to a brat who breaks things on purpose and doesn't care. Even Squidward, even Mrs. Puff, everyone gets a bit sharper, a bit crueler, a bit more willing to be the villain of their own episode. And there's a word people use for this, when a character's defining trait gets exaggerated over time, until it swallows everything else that made them a person, The one big feature gets louder and louder until the rest of the character disappears behind it. Krabs becomes only greed. Patrick becomes only stupidity and selfishness. The nuance gets sanded off, and what's left is a caricature of what used to be a character. I find it genuinely a little sad watching it happen in order, because you can feel the show forgetting what these people used to be. The early episodes knew that Krabs loved his daughter and that the love complicated the greed. The later ones often just want the greed, because the greed is funny and reliable and easy to write. So they lean on it and lean on it, and the man underneath gets quieter and quieter until he's barely there at all. It's like watching someone you used to know slowly become a single one of their worst habits. Now, to be fair, and I always want to be fair, the show mostly found its way back. The later years soften a lot of them again. Remember the hearts under the flaws. Let the characters be people rather than just their loudest trait. So it's not a straight line down into cruelty. It's more of a dip, a stretch in the middle where everyone got a bit horrible, and then a gradual return to something warmer. But that dip is real. And if you ever wondered why some SpongeBob feels lovely and some feels weirdly mean, that's usually why. You've wandered into the years where they had all forgotten how to be kind, and it connects to something we keep circling tonight, which is that these characters were never simple. There was always a nice version and a nasty version, living in the same body, and the show could reach for either. What the middle years did was just reach for the nasty one more often. The capacity for cruelty was always there, right from the soul-selling in the early days. It just got indulged more freely for a while, until the tenderness underneath got hard to find. I don't hold it against the show, particularly. Everything that runs long enough goes through a rough patch, loses the thread, finds it again. People do the same, come to think of it. We all have our curdled years, our stretches where our worst trait gets the run of the place and the better parts of us go quiet. Bikini Bottom just had its curdled years on television, in front of everyone, one exaggerated crab at a time. And then, mostly, it came good again, which is more than a lot of us manage. If you step all the way back and look at the shape of the whole show, the thing the entire town orbits is a recipe. A burger recipe. The Krabby Patty formula, kept secret by Mr. Krabs, coveted endlessly by plankton, and fought over, in one form or another, across hundreds and hundreds of episodes. That's the central conflict of SpongeBob. Two old friends locked in a decades-long Cold War over how to make a sandwich. And when you say it like that, it's a bit absurd and a bit sad and honestly, a bit morally murky in both directions. Because neither side of this war is exactly clean. Take Krabs' side. He guards this recipe like it's a nuclear launch code. There's an actual safe. There are rules in a handbook about never revealing its location. The secrecy is total, and the paranoia is real. And you sort of go along with it because Plankton's the villain, and villains shouldn't get what they want. But step back and ask, what's actually being protected here? And it's a monopoly. Krabs has the one thing everybody wants. He keeps it locked away so that only he can profit from it. And he constantly battles his one competitor, who usually ends up poor and customerless. That's not the plucky little guy defending his livelihood. That's the market leader crushing the small business across the road and hoarding the one asset that could ever let anyone else compete. In the real world, we don't always cheer for that fella. Then take Plankton's side. His whole existence is bent towards stealing that recipe, and stealing is stealing. Industrial espionage isn't suddenly fine, because you're small and sympathetic. He builds machines, he runs cons, he'd take the formula by force if he could. He is, technically, the criminal in this arrangement. And yet, as we talked about earlier, you end up half on his side anyway, because all he actually wants is for one person to eat at his restaurant, and the only thing standing between him and that modest dream is a rich crab who could share the recipe or license it, or just let the man have a win once in a while, and instead chooses to keep him crushed forever. So it's a war with no clean side. A hoarder versus a thief. a monopolist versus a desperate underdog who happens to also be a crook. And the genius of it, or maybe just the accident of it, is that the show lets you feel the pull of both without ever resolving it. You want Krabs to keep his recipe safe because that's the rule of the show, and you want Plankton to finally, just once, get a taste of the success he spent his whole life reaching for. Those two wants don't fit together, and the show never makes them fit. It just keeps them both alive, episode after episode, forever. What I find quietly lovely about it is that underneath the war, these two used to be friends. The show remembers this even when the characters don't. There are glimpses here and there of a time before the recipe came between them, when they were just two little sea creatures who liked each other. And then a burger got in the way, and the money got in the way, and the wanting got in the way, and now they've spent their entire adult lives as enemies over a sandwich. A friendship dissolved into a rivalry that neither of them can put down, because too much time has passed and too much pride has built up. And it's easier to keep fighting than to admit it was always a bit daft. There's a whole quiet tragedy in that, if you want to find it. Two mates, torn apart by one of them getting rich and the other one not, spending decades locked in a struggle over the very thing that split them. One of them guards his fortune and his recipe and his monopoly and calls it winning. The other one loses and loses and loses and calls it trying, and the sandwich sits in the middle of it all, in its little safe, worth more to both of them than the friendship they burned to get it. It's the most fought over object in the ocean, and it's a burger. Just a burger. Somewhere in there is a lesson about what people will destroy over money and pride, but the show's far too kind to spell it out. So it just draws the burger and keeps the war going and lets you notice the sadness, or not, as you please. There's a question sitting underneath everything we've talked about tonight, and I think it's worth turning over gently before we wind down. The question is whether the show knows, whether all this wrongdoing, all this greed and cruelty and casual burial of health inspectors is something the writers slipped in by accident, or something they put there on purpose with a little glint in their eye. And I'm fairly convinced it's the glint. The show knows exactly what it's doing. It always has. You can tell because of how it frames the darkest bits. Go back to the burial episode, the one on the stormy night. It doesn't just tell that story, it wraps it in a little French narrator who sighs at the whole thing and calls the two of them idiots. That's a knowing move. That's a show putting a wink right there in the frame, telling you, we know this is mad. We know these two are behaving appallingly. Come and laugh at them with us. The narrator is the show's own raised eyebrow. It's aware that what you're watching is genuinely dark, and it's chosen to hold it at arm's length and find it funny rather than sit in it. That's a deliberate bit of stagecraft, the work of people who could plainly see how dark the story underneath was. The same knowingness runs all through it. The way Squidward's dead hopes and dreams get their own gravestone in the background of a scene about a hat. Nobody stumbles into an image that precise. That's a writer who understands exactly how sad Squidward is and has decided to plant a tiny, perfect monument to it right where you'll half see it. The show isn't accidentally poignant, it's poignant with full awareness, on purpose, and then it moves on quickly so you don't have time to well up. That's craft. That's a show that knows its own heart and its own shadows, and plays them both like instruments. Which changes how I feel about the whole enterprise, actually. Because if the darkness were accidental, if the show genuinely didn't realise that its lovable crab was a monster, and its happiest character was being exploited, and its saddest one was quietly grieving his whole life, then it'd be a bit grim. A cheerful surface with an ugliness underneath it that nobody meant. But that's not what this is. The people making it saw all of it. They knew Krabs was greedy to the point of villainy. They knew Squidward was tragic. They knew the town was a fickle mob, and the police were useless, and Plankton was more sinned against than sinning. They knew, and they built the show anyway, with all of it in there, held just lightly enough that a child sees a funny cartoon and an adult sees something considerably stranger and sadder and more honest about people. That's the trick of it, in the end. SpongeBob is a show that tells the truth about how people are, that greed and cruelty and pettiness and exploitation are all just there, woven through ordinary life, sitting right next to the kindness and the friendship and the joy. And it tells that truth in the gentlest possible package, with bright colours and a jaunty tune, so that the truth goes down easy and never once feels like a lecture. It never wags its finger. It never makes you feel bad for enjoying it. It just quietly shows you a whole town full of flawed creatures doing flawed things, forgives every one of them by never holding it against them, and invites you to do the same. And I think that's why it's such a strange comfort to have on late at night. Not despite all the wrongdoing we've catalogued, but almost because of it. There's something reassuring about a world that contains all this pettiness and greed and cruelty, and still somehow remains fundamentally warm, where nothing bad ever really lands, where every grievance dissolves, where the worst crab in the ocean is also somehow a beloved old captain, and the whole town gets to be terrible and forgiven at the same time. It's a soft, generous, deeply unanxious way of looking at how flawed everyone is. Yes, they're all a bit dreadful, and the show loved them anyway, and quietly asked us to do the same. That gentleness, more than any single episode, is the thing that keeps pulling me back to it. Night after night, long after I stopped being a child who could take it all at face value. A show that saw how petty and greedy and daft people can be, and settled on being fond of them anyway. I've said a few times tonight that the one thing redeeming Mr. Krabs, the one crack in the greed where a bit of light gets in, is his daughter. He loves Pearl, properly loves her, in a way the money never quite reaches. And I stand by that. But I want to complicate it a little before we finish, because the love and the greed don't sit in separate rooms in him. They're tangled together, and when they pull against each other, the greed wins more often than a loving father's should. Even with her, even for her. Pearl, for anyone who doesn't know, is a whale. A teenage whale, daughter of a crab, which the show never explains, and is all the better for not explaining. She's a fairly ordinary teenager, all things considered. She wants the things teenagers want. To fit in, to have nice things, to have a birthday that doesn't embarrass her in front of her friends. Modest stuff, the stuff any dad should be able to provide, especially a dad who is, let's not forget, sitting on a personal fortune large enough to bathe in. And yet her birthdays are a running disaster, because Krabs cannot bring himself to spend the money. There's an episode built entirely around this, where Pearl wants a proper party, a nice one, the kind her friends would be impressed by, and Krabs, rather than simply paying for it, tries to do the whole thing on the cheap and ruins it. He throws her a party so miserly, so transparently corner-cutting, that it becomes humiliating. This is a girl's birthday, her actual birthday, the one day of the year that's meant to be hers, and her father, who could give her anything, gives her the bare minimum his wallet will tolerate, and calls it love, and can't understand why she's upset. That's the bit that gets me. He genuinely doesn't understand. In his head he did love her that day. He showed up, he made an effort, he even spent a little, which for him is a real sacrifice. But the effort was shaped entirely around spending as little as possible, and a party built on that principle isn't really a gift to the birthday girl. It's a gift to his own bank balance, with her name written on it. He turned his daughter's celebration into another exercise in not spending, and he couldn't see that he'd done it, because the not spending is so deep in him that it feels like common sense rather than a choice. And this is a man who, we know, would move mountains for her in the abstract. Ask him if he loves his daughter, and he'd tell you she means more to him than all the money in the sea, and he'd mean it in the moment. But watch what he actually does when the two come into contact, when loving her properly would cost real money, and the wallet snaps shut on reflex. The love is genuine. It's just not quite strong enough to overpower the thing that runs him. And the thing that runs him doesn't take days off, not even for her birthday. There's something quietly sad in that, and it's a different sadness from all the others we've talked about. It's not the sadness of a victim, like Squidward or Mrs. Puff or Plankton. It's the sadness of a man who is failing the one person he'd swear he'd never fail, and doesn't even know he's doing it. Pearl isn't oppressed by her father the way the crew are oppressed by their boss. She's just quietly, steadily let down by him, in small ways over and over, because his love for her keeps losing narrow contests with his love for money, and he never notices the contests are happening. I think about what it must be like to grow up with that. A dad who loves you, who'd tell anyone he loves you, who is nonetheless incapable of spending what it takes to actually show it, who turns your birthday into a budgeting exercise and genuinely believes he's done right by you. That's a specific kind of childhood, and Pearl carries it with more grace than you'd expect, mostly. She gets frustrated, she calls him out, and then, like everyone in this town, she lets it go and carries on. Because what else is there to do? He's her dad. He's not going to change. The greed's not going anywhere. And underneath it, buried deep, there really is a father who loves her, even if the love can only ever come out in the narrow gaps the money leaves it. Maybe that's the most human thing about Krabs in the end. Not the villainy, the failure. The very ordinary, very recognisable failure of a person whose worst trait keeps quietly sabotaging their best intentions, even toward the people they'd die for. He'd never sell Pearl for 62 cents. Of that I'm sure. But he'd give her a cut-price birthday and never understand why it wasn't enough, and in its own small way that tells you just as much about him as anything with the Flying Dutchman ever could. One more, and then we'll let it rest, because I've been fairly generous to SpongeBob tonight, calling him the good one, the kind heart, the innocent who just keeps ending up on the wrong end of other people's schemes. And that's mostly fair. But I'd be letting him off too lightly if I didn't mention Gary, because when it comes to that snail, even SpongeBob has moments he ought to answer for. Gary, for the uninitiated, is SpongeBob's pet snail, who meows like a cat and is, quietly, one of the smartest and most sensible characters in the whole show. Gary understands things the others miss. Gary sees through people, and most of the time, SpongeBob loves him dearly and looks after him well. But there's an episode, an infamous one, where SpongeBob brings home a second pet, a strange fluffy little thing, and becomes so taken with the new arrival that he completely neglects Gary, worse than neglects him. The new pet turns out to be a monster that's actively trying to eat Gary, and SpongeBob, blinded by his new toy, keeps taking the monster's side. He scolds Gary. He ignores the poor snail's very obvious terror. Gary is, plainly, in danger and distress, and his owner, the one creature meant to protect him, keeps brushing it off because he's infatuated with something new and shiny. It's genuinely uncomfortable to watch, that one, precisely because it's so out of character. This is the loving, loyal, gentle Sponge, and here he is being a careless, neglectful pet owner, so wrapped up in the new that he can't see the old friend suffering right in front of him. And it's not the only time. There are stretches where Gary gets forgotten, left hungry, handed off to catastrophically unsuitable minders like Patrick and his flamethrower bath. For a pet who's given nothing but loyalty, Gary spends a surprising amount of the show being let down by the people meant to care for him. What I take from it is that the innocence I keep granting SpongeBob has limits, and Gary is where you find them. It's easy to be good to the people who are easy to be good to. It's easy for SpongeBob to be sweet to his friends and devoted to his boss and cheerful with the whole town. The test of a person is usually the one who depends on them completely and can't advocate for themselves, and that's Gary. A pet, a creature entirely at SpongeBob's mercy. And SpongeBob, lovely as he is, sometimes fails that test, gets distracted, takes the loyal little snail for granted, assumes Gary will always be there, always forgive, always meow at the door when he gets home, no matter how thoroughly he's been overlooked. And Gary does, of course. That's the quiet mercy of Gary. He forgives. He's still there at the end of every episode, sensible and steadfast, loving an owner who doesn't always earn it. Same as everyone in this town, really, giving more grace than they get. It's just a bit more poignant coming from the one character who can't even use words to complain about it. He just watches and knows and stays. So even the good one has his off days. Even the kindest heart in Bikini Bottom can be careless with the thing that trusts him most. I don't say it to knock him, because I'm still fond of him, deeply fond. I say it because a fair wander through this town has to be fair all the way down, and being fair all the way down means admitting that nobody here is spotless, not even the sponge, not even the one you'd swear was pure. There's a bit of the town's carelessness in everyone who lives in it, and Gary, patient and forgiving and quietly wise, is the one who catches the sponge's share of it. So that's the wander, more or less. A slow amble through a happy little town where nearly everyone is quietly guilty of something, and nobody ever really pays for it, and the whole thing stays somehow lovely anyway. We started with a crab in a bathtub full of coins, and I think that's still the image I'd leave you with, because it holds so much of it. A man whose deepest peace comes from being submerged in money, who'll sell a soul for pocket change and rob a grave for a hat and tear down a cinema over a penny, and who is, all the same, the beloved old captain of a beloved old show. That's the whole town in one crab, really. Terrible and cherished in equal measure, and never once asked to choose between the two. And the thing I keep landing on, drifting off to this show as often as I do, is how little any of it actually puts me off. I've just spent an hour or two laying out every questionable thing these characters get up to, and I'll happily have it back on tomorrow night without a second thought. The greed doesn't put me off. The cruelty doesn't put me off. The buried inspector and the sold soul and the poor woman slowly losing her mind in the passenger seat of a boat. None of it puts me off. If anything, it makes the whole thing feel more real, more lived in, more like an actual place with actual people in it, flawed and forgiven and carrying on regardless. There's no grand point to make about any of it, and I wouldn't want to make one even if there were, because grand points aren't what you want at this hour. I just find it quietly funny and quietly touching that the coziest show on television, the one so many of us reach for when we want to switch our brains off and drift, is underneath it all a portrait of a town full of small daily wrongs. Nobody's a hero, nobody's punished, everyone's a bit dreadful, and everyone's forgiven, and the tide of each episode washes it all away before the next one starts. Maybe that's the real comfort of it. Not that the characters are good, because they mostly aren't, but that goodness was never the point. The point was that you could be greedy and petty and cruel and oblivious and still belong, still be loved, still have a place in the bright little town at the bottom of the sea. There's a strange kind of mercy in a world like that. A world where nothing sticks, nobody's cast out for good, and every flaw is just another thing about someone you're fond of. I think I'll leave it there. I might have more of these in me, other corners of other shows to wander through some night when neither of us can sleep. But for now, that's enough. The crab's back in his tub, Squidward's back at his register, the sponge is back at his grill, humming to himself, happy as anything, holding a shovel he doesn't quite realise he's holding, and Bikini Bottom carries on the way it always does, cheerful and lawless and completely at peace with itself. Sleep well. It really is a lovely little town, for all its faults, maybe because of them.